Welcome everyone to Committee of the Whole on November 12th, 3 p.m. The District of Sechelt is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. We respect the histories, language, and culture of the people of the Sechelt Nation, whose presence continues to enrich this community. Om Nosh. Okay, Council, I will look to you. Call to order and declaration of conflict. If there is any, please declare. Seeing none, I'll move to the adoption of the agenda as presented. Councillor Toth, Councillor Rowe, all in favor of the agenda as presented. Thank you. Okay, then let's move on. There's no delegations or proclamations, and then let's move to then flood mapping update. And Raf, if you would just want to introduce yourself. I always call you Raf, so if you want to do your formal introduction to everyone, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Manager of Sustainable Development at the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and here to pleased to be providing an update on a project we completed with the District of Sechelt on our coastal flood mapping project. So we got a few slides here that I can run through a little bit of what the project was and how to interpret the map. And then I'd be happy to take any questions after that.
Thanks.
So to start, climate change or global warming is primarily driven by the burning of fossil fuels. And the warming temperatures are increasing sea level rise in two primary mechanisms. So the first one is the melting of glaciers, primarily those that are above ground, kind of like adding more ice cubes to your water glass. And then the second mechanism is actually thermal expansion. So as the oceans warm, the molecules of water get more space in between them. And that's contributing to a lot of the sea level rise that we will see. This increase is non-linear, and as global warming accelerates, so too will the sea level rise. In BC, we have guidelines on what to plan for. So right now the guidelines are saying 0.5 meters of sea level rise by 2050 and 1 meters of sea level rise by 2100. And because these mechanisms are slow moving, they are locked in. This level of sea level rise, about 1 meter, is locked in. If the entire planet stopped producing carbon pollution tomorrow, we would slow down the rate of increase, but we wouldn't take that away entirely. And alternatively, if we continue to burn fossil fuels, then we'll just accelerate that rate of increase. But yeah, we're talking about a very slow moving change, not unlike other things like wildfires or other climate impacts that are a lot more fast moving. Part of the project is we did a photo contest at the King Tide in December of 2024, and it really provides a useful indicator of what a high tide will look like twice a day by 2050. And this is just down the street here. So the specific flooding that we're talking about, somebody told me this gets distracting when the animation doesn't stop. But for the specific coastal flooding we're talking about, we need multiple things that each have their own probability to happen at exactly the same time. So the first one is the existing high tide, which we know is quite predictable. Then we have a storm surge, which we can now predict increasingly well as well. We need the wind and the waves to come in as well. And in this project, our consultants modeled the wind and the wave coming from multiple directions to figure out which one would cause the worst case scenario. And then finally, we have sea level rise, which is exacerbating this situation. So we need all these things to happen together for the lines on the map to be where they are in the scenario we're describing. The project we undertook was primarily around updating flood mapping, but we also have a coastal flood management policy brief, which looked at primarily land use policy that's within local government jurisdiction. And we did some initial community outreach and engagement. The map that you see on the left of the slide here represents all the other jurisdictions that have undertaken detailed coast flooding mapping. And we were the last ones to do that detailed work. So now a lot of the areas are in fact redoing the work to get more updated and more detailed products. So briefly, the policy recommendations. Well, we all currently regulate development in hazard areas, all the local governments on the Sunshine Coast, but there's areas where we can update and improve those development permit areas. There is some recommendations around creating more consistent and clear policy. And then in the context of our official community plans, there was some recommendations around mainstreaming coastal flood adaptation across the entire sections rather than leaving it to a specific climate section, for example. And then raising the awareness and education of coastal flooding in general was one of the recommendations. So there's a whole report that dives into these in more detail and does a comparative analysis on all the local governments that were involved in the project. Now, what do the maps actually look like? And I'll spend a little bit of time here walking us all through how to interpret the maps, because there's a lot of information. And these are publicly available on the SCRD property viewer, so people can take their time in navigating them. The first map that we created was inundation maps. This is where the water will be at high tide with a storm surge, twice a day. And we've got different lines here for 0 meters, 0.5, 1, and 2 meters of sea level rise. The 0.5 meters of sea level rise is really helpful when we're thinking about asset management and what do we want to do with taking care of our existing infrastructure. The other ones, the 1 meter and the 2 meters sea level rise become more important when we're talking about where do we want to put our future community nodes and where do we want to put growth, because we're trying to think long term. You can see in the images here from the December 2024 king tide, we're talking about a static water level that's at that height. So that's what it looks like, and this is what the lines on the map look like. So the pale purple is current inundation at current sea levels, and then the darker the purple line, the more the sea level increases. So I just took a snippet here of Sechelt. And then here's another snippet of Davis Bay. I took these two pictures because they are the most material for most of the Sunshine Coast. The lines don't go this far inland. The other map that we generated was a flood construction level. Now, flood construction level is where the minimum habitable zone should be, or habitable height should be in a building. It's important to note that the maps that we've created here are not the maps that you have in your regulatory tools or that we have at the SCRD in our regulatory tools. That will require steps for them to be incorporated into the development permit areas or whatever approach you may choose. The structure in British Columbia is to base this flood construction level map on wave effect, freeboard, which is a safety buffer, and 1 meters of sea level rise. So again, we'll dive into what this actually looks like. In order to model the wave effect, we created, I forget the exact number, but a huge number, every 200 meters of coast, a transect with a model of what the wave would look like at that specific point. And those are the numbers that you see, 5.2, 6.8, 7.2. That's the flood construction level with the wave coming in. The shaded area of purple is how big the wave effect contributes to that. But in some limited, so here you have, and then what they did is they connected those different transects with the elevation on the shoreline. So the flood construction level is a transect, and then you connect it to the next transect. Now, that was the method to get to this map. But there's another line here, the pale blue line, which in some cases is the method we need to take to determine what the flood construction level is. And that's not considering wave effect. So I'll go to the next slide because the most noticeable place where this is happening is in Sechelt Village. So what happens here is there's a high coastal area that intercepts that wave. So if we were to take the wave run up, it would just basically hit the shoreline of Seashelt and wouldn't go further inland. So there's no inundation from that wave effect. But there's another method of developing flood construction levels, which just takes that flood construction level and adds the freeboard onto it, which is that safety buffer. So it's not saying that the water is going to be there. It's saying that with the safety buffer, because there's a lot of unknowns, that's where the flood construction level line is probably is in this project. So you can see the transects on the bottom part are A6, 7.5, 8.8. But then there's that blue line that goes into Sechelt Village because of that freeboard. You know, the Sechelt Village is lower than the coastline. So by having the design water level and then adding that freeboard, it actually brings that FCL into Sechelt Village. The third and final map that we created was a coastal vulnerability index. And that is an indication of how susceptible the shoreline is to erosion. So it goes from low, medium to high. A low coastal vulnerability index is something like bedrock. If you think about a shoreline that gets hit by waves during a storm, if it's bedrock, it probably won't do much. But if it's a sandy shoreline that's never been exposed to wave action in the past, but with sea level rise we can expect a lot of erosion from those. So that's the flood mapping products. We've got a website that's live now, scrd.ca/flood-maps. All the information is there with some FAQs on how to interpret the information, some resources on where to get additional support if interested. We're also offering a Green Shores training for developers or service providers or people who are interested, November 26th. That was just confirmed with the Stewardship Council of BC that offers some training on nature-based solutions for shoreline. And the important thing to note here is that these maps are, they're a moment in time. If people modify the shoreline, the wave effect would actually change at that shoreline. Hardening the shore would create a bigger wave. So thank you very much for your time. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thanks. So it's easy for you to go back into your presentation, obviously. Oh, okay, great. Because we have questions on the documents, much like I had, and we also I had a paper version for council if they wanted the large version that was presented. So any questions of council members that are here? Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'm just wondering what are the assumptions of this mapping? Because sometimes, as you say, by the time you do your mapping, the climate has changed and it's out of date. So is it 1.5 degrees? Because we sort of know that we've already reached that and it's not 2050. So if you could just tell me about the assumptions on that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The sea level rise is a slow-moving mechanism that's locked in already with a certain level of global warming to be expected. The 1 meter sea level rise is locked in with a 2 degrees or even with a 1.5 at this point. If we were to go beyond that, then the change would happen earlier, and we would maybe exceed the 1 meters of sea level rise in that case.
Just to clarify, some of those levels you showed were meters, right? Like 5 meters, 7.8 meters for development height. That's quite a bit, isn't it? It's not feet, so people know that it's meters.
Did you want to confirm that then with the question being asked, please?
Yes, we did work with the metric system.
Okay. Any other questions of council members? Okay, Councilor Shepherd.
Thanks again for the presentation. I'm just through the chair wondering if as the district updates its own OCP, are we incorporating these maps? Are we looking to them? Thanks.
Through the chair. Yes, we'll certainly be looking at these maps, this study as we move through the OCP process and take this into account. Yes.
The indication of the Green Shores training and things like that, the Green Shores discussion, which I think we've been discussing as a government probably 20 years now, reaction to ocean rise. Are our staff as part of that training, are we talking about things like that in any substantive way to adjust to? We have, so obviously it's private property in many parts of the district, so hopefully they know how to adjust individuals, but the district has a number of parklands and that may be affected, including the waterfront here, the boulevard. Yeah.
Yes, the last time the Green Shores training was offered, we had a number of staff attend. It was down in the Ocean Beach Esplanade area. We had at least half a dozen of our staff there. And you're right, it's been a discussion for a long time. I've been to training and seminars probably more than 15 years ago. And so we've looked at that. That fed into the development permit area number 3, I believe, in the OCP, the shoreline protection area, which is meant to look at setbacks to the ocean, habitat conservation, as well as softer edge development along shorelines. And we do look at that rather than a vertical retaining wall. There's native vegetation that can be planted. It's supplementing rock and harderscapes. So it's Green Shores principles based, some of our policy.
Okay, good. Really important as we go forward for our infrastructure. Councillor Shepherd.
Yeah, through the chair, just to follow up on that point, I think the TELUS Breeze project incorporated green principles in terms of shoreline development and moving away from hard structures. Is that not correct?
Yes, that is correct. There's still pending provincial approval to remove that head wall that exceeds beyond the natural boundary, but the hope is to remove that and soften the foreshore and vegetation rather than that hard edge. Well, yeah, it was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that the regional district, who you're the lead on this, is talking a lot about Green Shores to individuals and or other communities to make sure that we bring in those principles to deal with wave action, right? And stuff like that, that people know that there's options rather than by a boat, right? Yeah. People to, there's actions. The other thing I was going to ask you about that I realized after we talked last time is my concern, and I've been repetitive with it, is Wharf Road and Davis Bay. And then I realized that the Wharf Road is actually, it goes down into Porpoise Bay. So, and yet I'm concerned about this area. So I was thinking, and maybe it's on your map and you had it there, is Porpoise Bay must be lower, because I was more worried about this end than that. And it was really weird. It goes down, yet I'm worried about this end flooding. So there must be something going on there. Yeah. And your maps may have said that, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just if you're interested, I think there's the possibility of overtopping in a lot of these cases. And it's what happens if there's overtopping of a higher shoreline point, then there's some pooling of the water in a further inland area, and then becomes another adaptation challenge of getting the water out of the pooled area.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I listened to the RD presentation, which I think was a little longer. The conclusion sort of was focused on the impact of our assets as a municipal organization, primarily, but not on the impacts on private landowners. And so I'm just wondering, how do we address that? And I think for one thing, we can expect is that the insurance companies will be ahead of us on this, that they will be looking at this mapping. They are now, I'm sure. And I've heard that some people are actually having trouble getting house insurance right now because of the level of the water. But can you comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The SCRD is working on the next phase of this project, specifically on a multi-hazard climate risk assessment to our SCRD assets. So that's a framework that we would be happy to share with your staff as we collaborate forward on trying to better understand you know, this is one amongst multiple climate hazards, and we don't have the capacity to do a deep dive on every single hazard separately. So we're looking at it more from a holistic perspective. And then we can look at cascading consequences as well. From the insurance perspective, I believe the insurance sector is quite well informed in this realm, and we're not really necessarily sharing information that they weren't aware of in the past. But yeah, the federal government, there's a lot of work across the world right now around how to address these risks and these challenges.
If I could just comment on that, I guess it's fair to say that with these maps, the long-term idea is to step back from these areas. I mean, I don't think anybody's discussed about building seawalls to protect us like New Orleans or anything like that. And also, I mean, I think about the impact of sea rise on the rest of the province, the Lower Mainland. I don't want to talk about that because that's going to affect all of BC. So I think it behooves us to make a strong policy and try and, even apart from all of the analysis being done for multi-hazards, to look at sea rise and definitely make that a priority as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Councilor McLaughlin, by bringing it up, though, you are talking about it, those areas that we all know that are low. Any other questions from council? Okay, thanks. Thanks for making your way here to present to us. We appreciate it. Okay, council, let's go on then to 5.2, Community Land Development Analysis and Official Community Plan Project Update. Director Allen, did you have presenters on this then, or?
No presenters. I just invited our staff to come down and observe and participate, as it's a project team of several. So no specific presentation either. I just felt that it was appropriate to update committee as to where we are on this and where we're going. It seems evident that the official community plan as a whole will not be completed prior to the end of this term. And so I just wanted to outline what that means, and subject to council will probably provide a report at least once a quarter into 2026 to provide regular updates, as well as the recommendation here is that we create a strategy to ensure continuity into the next term. But I'll take a step back for a moment. As council is aware, we presented the community land development analysis in September, and we submitted that to UBCM. So that was the first part of that project, and that's good. The next step to carry on with the funding model from UBCM is to conduct the scenario analysis for growth patterns in seashells. And we're working on that, getting that started. Has been a bit of time here where we need to take that next step, and we met with our project team, our consultant team today, and we've identified a plan for next step. And so it's a funny thing with the funding. The funding enables us to do this scenario analysis for development, but it does not enable us to use that money on an official community plan review. Of course, the outcome of the scenario development will, of course, form a part of the OCP. So it's a little bit of stick handling for us to work our way through that. We also recognize clearly that we need to enhance our engagement plan moving forward for both the scenario development as well as the official community plan. And we're working on an update to our terms of service with our consultant to help us come up with more engagement, more ideas. And so we also appeal to council at this point as well. If there are anything you would like us to do or consider, we have a large list of folks and groups that we engage with. We have inquired about various ideas, and it's standard practice to have an advisory committee. And if we do that at council's discretion, how would that committee be formed to create a broad cross-section of the community? Councillor Toth and I were discussing one time, and I put this into our Google Copilot and said, create 7 personality profiles within the District of Sechelt based on the most recent census data. And it created these profiles of these hypothetical people ranging across the spectrum from teenagers through to people who work from home in the IT sector and travel into Vancouver, through to people who have lived here for a long time, to people who are perhaps underhoused. It was quite an interesting little experiment just to find a way to give us that diversity that we're seeking. And so we'll be creating a more enhanced engagement plan, sharing that with council in the first quarter, as well as taking that step and doing more community engagement as relating to the scenario developments as the CLDA project blends into the OCP. So while there are recommendations today here, I think that I was at the point from our internal discussions where I felt it was important for us as staff to present an update to council and share this report with you. And should you have any questions or direction for us, we'd be pleased to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Allen. Just a reminder to the committee, we have a number of questions, of course, we can ask. It's an opportunity being welcomed here by the director, but we also have recommendation with A, B, and C there on the page if we want to move to that at the end of the question and answer period. Thanks. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. My apologies for missing the last SCAF meeting, but I'm pretty sure they're chomping at the bit to engage on this process. And so I'm just looking to see if staff have given any thought to presenting to the Community Association Forum or engaging with them sort of prior to the start of next year. I think there's still might be one more opportunity before the end of the year to present to SCAF. So just, yeah, wondering if staff have given that contemplation yet.
We contemplated either along with council attending one of the meetings with SCAF or having a workshop with SCAF and council members to work on some of those. And we recognize the interest from the various community associations, no question.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just to comment on that comment, I think it would be good to have a working group, a session where we can speak more openly and do more kind of open designing and drawing rather than a SCAF meeting, because it's a SCAF meeting is a pretty formal meeting, rightly so. But I think we need a chance to really discuss all kinds of issues more freely in a workshop or whatever with SCAF myself. Thank you.
I guess you heard that, but I'll repeat for others that may not have heard me. That's a good idea as to how to include SCAF in a more informal event in order to get the information from those groups and who they represent in the community.
Sure.
That's one idea. Any other thoughts from council members?
So I'm sorry I have so many opinions. I'm an urban planner training, so I love this stuff. But I think it'd be interesting to also connect with other Gibson Way type of municipalities and like Roberts Creek, Elphinstone, et cetera, because I think 20 years will be more like Gibson's and they will be changing. So I'm wondering how this area will be melding together almost, you know, so that the separate OCPs may not be that useful, but if we can make them more useful, if we acknowledge that there's all these things in common and things we can share, and that the density will probably, I think, be as much as it can be in Gibson's, just because a lot of people from Vancouver are moving over and there's just that overflow, I think. So that will, I think, also affect the density, especially, you know, along the highway, if it's not flooded, and affect, you know, because we do need to plan for infrastructure and for housing and density together. It's not a competition. And I would also like to see C-Rise as a defining point there to start with. I don't think there's any point pretending like it's not going to happen and pretending we can put density in there like it's 1980. Thanks.
So Director Alling, I'm assuming that there's cross-pollination and cooperation all over the Sunshine Coast. That's my assumption, maybe confirmed by you.
That is correct, yes. We meet regularly with SCRD and Town of Gibson's planning directors and then staff as well. Gibson's has, I believe, recently adopted their OCP. Every time there's a new OCP that's adopted, we certainly look at it and say, hey, what can we learn from this? This is brand new. What are some things that make sense here. And there's a few around the province and absolutely work regularly with town
Yeah,
officials.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's an interesting discussion because I see Gibson's is having probably 3 distinct neighborhoods, but Sechelt has probably 8. Right? So that's a different discussion, but similar. Any other thoughts from council? Okay, council, we have recommendation in front of us, A, B, and C. Yes?
Yeah, I'll move them.
Okay, great. Thanks. Counselor Toth, seconder. Counselor Shepherd. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Thank you. Thanks, committee. We are now at the end of our agenda items. I will look for a motion to adjourn then. Counselor Shepherd, Counselor Toth, all in favor of adjournment? Okay, great. Any questions on the agenda items presented here today? To those online? Counselor